Defense! Defense! All right, you need to play some defense when it comes to wealth preservation. And hopefully you've already taken my advice on this where you downshifted once. So if you remember driving a stick, you downshift to kind of slow down. You know what I'm saying? You go from fifth to fourth, fourth to third. You know what I'm talking about. And that's how you slow down. And so you're taking more control of your steering. Anyway, so what is happening here is I've suggested, I don't know, going back to, I can't remember, November of last year, to downshift. So for me, I was all stocks, and now I'm heavy into Wellington. Wellington is by far and away my biggest holding. I'm still putting $2,000 every 2 weeks into VTI, the total stock index, but I have downshifted to protect what I've built up over the last utmost years. All right, and so you should do the same. Now you don't have to. I literally you should do whatever you want. But if you're in Wellington, you should go to Wellesley. If you're in Wellesley's probably the extent. Maybe I don't know. I don't. It's tough for me to go too far away from some exposure stocks, but that's me. If you're 100% stocks, Wellington, that's me. If you're Wellington, Wellesley. If you're Wellesley, I don't know. I'm not sure I'd go too deep into to defense because at some point, the problem is I just don't know. You don't know, I don't know, and so you want to be hedged on both sides. All right, so I'm reading this article I got from Med Faber because I'm on his email list, and this is from Macro, Big Totem Macro. I'm not sure who is this. I think it's a lady who wrote this, and I was into it until a couple things here. I was into it until a couple things. So let's just go into this a little bit. We believe we're in a new world that will shape the rest of our lives. We're at the beginning of the financial and geopolitical regime change. The arcs of history are bigger than any one man. Nixon's gold and China policies set the parameters of the world we're now leaving. More money has been printed over the last 50 years than at any other time in human history. But at the same time, globalization gave the U.S. access to the world's cheap labor and privileged ability to import the world's savings. Import the world's savings because they're buying the U.S. dollar is what she's saying, but by buying our bonds. But what did we do with those savings? We turn around and funnel them out to get the Chinese and Japanese products. So, I mean, I kind of get it. She's saying, hey, look, because we're the world dominated, the only currency in town, basically everyone used our dollar as the world currency, and as such, they bought our debt. Okay, but then we turn around and we gave that money right back to China and stuff to send us their products. That's the export and import economy that we've come to live in the last 40 to 50 years. Anyway, but I mean, whatever. Despite perpetual twin deficits and easy money, I don't get why she says twin deficits, perpetual twin deficit. I don't know what that means. But anyway, twin deficits and easy money, global integration kept inflation down. I completely 100% agree with that. And the dollar supported while supplying ample buyers for U.S. paper, which of course only rose in value in that regime, just like all assets. What? I thought the U.S. dollar was dropping like a freaking brick in water. That's what they all say. The dollar has lost 97% of its value since 1900. And yet, see, this is where the dollar's lost so much of its value since 1900. It's just so stupid. I hate hearing that because, like, are you buying the same? I mean, look, if you're talking about a bushel of corn, that's one thing. But if you're talking about a house, you're talking about friggin' a car, your computer, your cell phone. We're not living in the same environment. So to compare a dollar from 1900 to a dollar today for the creature comforts of modern America, it's just dumb, man. It's never mind electric. The whole just stupid. But if you want to talk solely on the price of bushel of corn, I get it, 100%. That's true. All right, let's keep going here. But let's see. But anyway, so the ample buyers for the U.S. dollar. So basically, what she is saying, and I guarantee this is a lady. I guess I can't remember why I think that, but I think it's a lady. She's saying basically because we had the dollar, it was the only current currency, we created the demand. And of course, high demand increases high value. People are willing to buy the dollar because we're the only game in town. All right. This virtuous loop over the last half century led to the most dramatic global welfare creation we will ever experience. What a time to be alive, those lucky boomers. So, yeah, I kind of disagree with that. That's a little bit... basically the boomers were welfare recipients of the rest of the world. That's kind of what she's implying. I find that cringeworthy, but be it as it may, we'll keep going. But the New World Order is one of constraints, constraints to liquidity, and constraints to where all that liquidity will go. Needless to say, but all right, I just want to go back again. Globalization gave the U.S. access to cheap labor, all right, 100%, and that's what kept inflation down. I completely, unequivocally agree with that. However, that is still here today. It's not quite as cheap as it used to be, but still a hell of a lot cheaper than everything we're doing in-house. As much as that pains me to say, I'm not the one going out there digging the ditches, building the semiconductor chips. I'm not the one doing it. I'm getting paid a fair wage. And if I were doing that in the United States, I'd be in a world of hurt because I'm competing against the Chinese who are doing it for slave labor. Why do you think Nike has all their, and Apple has other products over there? Because of slaves, man. We're not going to do that in the United States. We did that 150 years ago. We're not doing that anymore. So thus, we're either going to have to pay more for it, i.e. in causing inflation, or we're going to have to ship it out to foreign countries that'll do it for a hell of a lot cheaper. And that's just the nature of the beast, man. So that has kept inflation low. That's not, I don't know anyone who would deny that. I mean, that's just as sure as the sun rises in the east. But the New World Order is one of constraints, yeah. Needless to say, constraints are not what's priced in. Financially, we're moving away from the paradigm of liquidity abundance. We are? I mean, why? There's tons of liquidity out there. Financially, we're moving away from the paradigm of liquidity abundance. Profligacy creates inflation, which ends profligacy. Okay, but we had profligacy over the last. I mean, see, this is what I'm saying. Let's see. We printed more money right here. More money has been printed in the last 50 years than in any other period in human history. And then she goes, profligacy creates inflation, which ends profligacy. Okay, but we see this is the kind of stuff that drives me up the wall. You make up your mind, sister. I mean, profligacy creates inflation, but we didn't get inflation because what? Oh, we weren't whatever. We didn't print a lot of money. Yeah, we did. Oh, but globalization is what saved us. Oh, okay. So then profligation creates inflation, except when globalization's in there. It's kind of like gravity's guaranteed everything's going to drop, except when hydrogen goes up, or bumblebee or something like that. It's mathematical guaranteed science, except in these cases. It doesn't make any sense, man. Profligacy creates inflation, except in this other scenario. I hate that crap, man. All right, let's keep going. Or I said hydrogen or helium. Hydrogen goes up. I know helium does. Well, you know what I'm saying. So gravity happens, except when it doesn't. Inflation happens, except when it doesn't. You see what I'm saying? But I hate when they state these things as a matter of truth, as if literally A plus B equals C, except when it doesn't. Okay. All right, anyway, let's see here. Geopolitically, we're transitioning away from global integration under the unified rules of one superpower. We've only had one superpower in the last 30 years. That's it, man. Towards a multipolar world divided into spheres of influence and cooperation. What? I mean, where are you? While these shifts around the Ukraine are accelerating them in a violent way, we have no good historical analogs for financial and geopolitical regime change of this scale happening simultaneously, let alone after the biggest asset bubble ever relative related to world GDP, topping off 50 years of hyper-financialization. Again, I agree with that. We went from a building things manufacturing economy, this is the United States now, to basically everything being on paper assets, paper this, leverage, trading. And I did a video on, what was that bank called? Bankers Trust, how they went away from being a typical bank of lending to be one of trading. And then of course they went kaput. I mean, they're still around, but they just basically got their hands handed to them. Because that's just all leverage, and at some point, it's just a matter of luck. Some guys will be lucky, and some guys aren't. You can only be so lucky so long, but ultimately it's going to crash on you. We've grappled with how to fold these huge secular arcs of, let's see. All right, here we go. We have the period of building paper claims on real things is over, and the period of calling in those claims has begun. Well, who's calling in the claims? We've grappled with how to fold these huge secular arcs into practical investment framework, all right, whatever. The bad news is manifold. A lot of real wealth will simply be destroyed. More of what's going on in markets is uneconomic in nature. We, as investors, are ill-equipped to predict and price those sorts of idiosyncratic events. All right. Anyway, so right here, this two things jump out at me more than what we just talked about. The good news is alpha is coming back, baby. Skill will once again differentiate. So she's talking about hiring an asset manager to run your money because you'll get paid because there will be better skill than other people out there. This is so freaking silly. I've heard this so many times. Alpha is coming back, baby. So pay me money because that's where the growth is going to be. Because I'll be better than my peers. All right. Well, all right, you might be better than your peers. Your peers will be worse than you. The market will be here. You see what I'm saying? That's how it works. You got Jane, you got Joe, and then you got the market. Every single time, the market will be between Jane and Joe. Every time. If Jane gets 10 and Joe gets 8, the market's 9 inherently. If Jane charges 2% and Joe charges 1%, though, the market actually did better than both. Because Jane is now at, 10 and 8 and 9? Jane's now at 8 net of fees. The market is not at, it hasn't gone down. The market is 8 because the fees are already, there is no fees in the market essentially. So if Jane is at 10, Joe is at 8, the market's 9. If Jane charges 2, she's now at 8, and Joe is at 8. If Joe charges 1, Joe's at 7. The market has beat them both net of fees. Silly. And then on part 2 of this right here. It means big divergences between asset prices and fundamentals that formed over the last several years. So how are you going to, if we don't know anything, it's all idiosyncratic, and we have no clue what to make of this, how are you going to perform fundamentals? I mean, then fundamentals will be out the window because we don't know what the history is over. This is a new history. Anyway, this is what ticked me off. Nixon and gold standard. Volcker cleans up the mess. I hate this freaking bowing to the freaking altar of Volcker. I hate it. It's so I almost said effing. It's so flippin' stupid. It drives me insane. And what money-fueled hyper-financialization looks like, no, see, that's another thing that drives you up the wall, too. We've had progress over the last 40 years of trade. We've been able to exploit trade differences. Now, that might not have worked out great, but certainly better than what it was before. That's a fact. I mean, just look at the abundance of this world. To sit there and say it's all hyper-financialization without real progress of humanity, it's crazy. And so anyway, look right here. We see right here. That's when the freaking global markets took off. She's going to give Volcker the credit for that? That's freaking stupid. It actually ticks me off. It's dumb. It's not Volcker. All right, so, and I've talked about this another time. I'm not going to get into it here. But anyway, U.S. stocks are half the global market cap, never higher, and twice the 50-year average. I wonder why that would be. Why would that be, sister? Because the U.S. is freaking kicking ass and taking names. That's why. Now, you can say it's overpriced. That's fine. I'm going to do another video here in a little bit with Crestmont PE Research where they talk about that. But, I mean, at the end of the day, the U.S. is still the only game in town. To say, oh, my goodness, look at us. On top of it, where was Japan? One of the reasons we're so high is because Japan just got killed. Japan was a huge economic powerhouse, and they still are. From the stock market perspective, though they're not, but they were back in the 1980s, 1990. That's just a fact, a jack. And they just got smoked. So, anyway, I mean, could that have something to do with it? Of course it does. Of course it does. The Japan decline. Look, right? See, Japan in 1980, it's probably 1990. So, Japan, right? Look at that. The financial markets got killed, and this is the U.S. right here. Here's the rest of world stocks right there. Yeah, look at that. That looks pretty good to me. I mean, my goodness, she's like, oh my goodness, the U.S. is too high. I don't buy that into what inflationary real wealth destruction looks like. This is real wealth destruction? That's just stupid. All right. Anyway, so I agree that something else I want to hear on too, and I just don't know this stuff is stupid. So she basically is not big on the U.S. stocks because we're so big relative to the rest of the world. Where are you going to go? Pakistan? India looks okay to me, I suppose, but South America is going socialist again. Seems like every 20 years they go from socialist to conservative back to socialist, and now they're back to the socialist realm. I remember a year and a half ago now when the lefty won in Peru. I was like, I was in a gardening camp in Missouri with a guy who's native of Peru. And we're just shaking our heads like, I can't believe you're doing this again. But I mean, where are you gonna go? China, freaking. Where else are you gonna go, man? I mean, sub-Saharan Africa, I love my African brothers and sisters, but is there capital markets there? Europe. The only game in like Europe is dying. We've already gotten the numbers about the population. They're not having they're just not having the number of babies born as they were a year ago. I don't wonder why. Why could that possibly be? The demographics are doomed in Europe. They're not as bad here. They're just not. They're doomed in South Korea. They're doomed in China. They're doomed in Japan. I mean, maybe sub-Saharan Africa, Nigeria, maybe. But again, the capital market structure is definitely emerging markets. I got no qualm if you look there, but you're going to throw all your weight there? That seems to be a little bit risky. You're going to throw your weight to South America with a freaking socialist taking over everywhere? I mean, hopefully they turn out to be like AMLO. AMLO's done pretty good, but other than that, I'm not putting my money there. So you only got one, in my opinion. The only choice is right here, the good old US of A. Maybe a little bit towards India, some sub-Saharan Africa, and then US of A. Where else going to be? Europe? You crazy? Anyway, so the point being is, though, that includes government bonds as well, because I do think the days of the not runaway, the high inflation, the growth, high growth. That's what I want to say, not inflation, growth. I think those days are coming to an end. I do. I think that it's not going to be high growth. It's going to be like Japan, which is nothing wrong with the Japan economy. I mean, what I mean by that, it's not high growth, not high inflation. Just puttering along, but nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that, man. They can still turn the lights on. They can still feed their population. They still have modern amenities. It's just the days of unlimited growth from a stock perspective, I don't think are here anymore. I just don't. I just think the economic growth will be slower. Just kind of prodding along, and that's not necessarily the worst thing that ever happened. But it also means bonds look pretty good. Thus, going back to the beginning of this downshift. All right, love to hear your thoughts. We'll see you.